This is my talk for Yom Kippur 57/83/2022 called Not the Same Boat. I'm going to pick up where I left off with my Kol Nidre talk, which you can find under I cannot change that, but I can do this. If it's a day of forgiveness, I've been thinking about the state of Jewish life and the lives of Jews, in part prompted by the recent Ken Burns film, The U.S. and the Holocaust. After the Shoah, two places became the new old centers of Jewish life, and today, 85% of the world's Jewish population lives in either the U.S. or in Israel. Israel, which will mark its 75th anniversary this spring, and incidentally, because people sometimes ask me, the answer is no. The Jewish population remains lower than it was in 1939. Israel will choose its own direction, maybe, in elections next month. The diaspora is more in my mind, though through the lens of when I was last in Germany 11 years ago on a trip with other North American rabbis. The other talk, I spoke of my visit to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. But our visit wasn't all about the past. We went to shuls and schools too. I even got to give a Dvar Torah at a Berlin shul on Shabbat morning. It was the new synagogue, or the Oranienburger Strasse synagogue, which was completed in 1866, the main sanctuary with a capacity for 3,200 people, which is more than we even have here in this space by a lot. It's in Moore style with this gorgeous gold-ribbed dome. It's a central Berlin landmark, and it was spared total destruction on Kristallnacht by a police commissioner, Wilhelm Kreutzfeld, who interrupted the racist rioters who were tearing apart the interior, even called the fire brigade, sparing the building on the pretense that it had historic merit. Alas, stories like that are quite rare. During the war, the synagogue building was used as a storehouse by the Wehrmacht and was struck by Allied bombs. The main sanctuary sustained significant damage, and the East German authorities took down most of the main structure in the late 50s. The facade of the building, which held offices and the signature dome, remained, and since German reunification, this functions as the city's only Masorti conservative synagogue. I definitely was not going to pass up an opportunity to lead services there. So this massive, ornate sanctuary is gone. In fact, there's just a concrete slab outline of what was, with occasional stones indicating where the bima was, where the ark was. It's really just a massive open-air patio. Some of the melodies we use here in this space were composed there. It's sort of haunting to daven in a portion of a building, knowing that the main space is now a memorial, an open-air void. Still, the massive silent reminders of what was are less eloquent than what is. Gathering on Shabbat morning, not memorializing Jewish life, but living Jewish life. Not seeing desiccated Torah scrolls in a museum case, but reading and studying and discussing them and schmoozing over bagels afterwards. Great conversations, Jews rebuilding Jewish life, not based on nostalgia, but because it brings meaning and beauty to our lives, and insight and justice to the world. And that, of all places, one does not dismiss Judaism as a source of elementary level platitudes or mild inconveniences. So I printed a sheet with the teaching in Hebrew and English and gave a talk. Rabbi Gesed Edelberg, the German-born, Israeli-trained rabbi of the Oranienburger Strasse synagogue, the first female pulpit rabbi in German history, politely interjected with the German translations. The power of teaching Torah in the heart of Berlin is not to be taken for granted. It asserts a key fact of Jewish life. We're not just victims, though that's part of our history. We've picked ourselves up, and we continue to, and must know the past while moving into the future, not fetishizing the empty space where the grand sanctuary used to be, but gathering in the small room where Jewish life actually is. Some Jews visit Jewish museums to learn about Judaism. We're supposed to go beyond that and do Judaism, not as a museum piece, not as an exercise in sentimentality, but as the essential act in asserting that there is a moral order to the universe. That's what I saw in that community, resilience and refusal to give up. This is so important, and I fear somewhat misunderstood. I think a lot of American Jews, even those who show up in shuls, and many or most don't, so you're way out of the game if you're here, I can't reconcile the last 100 years of Jewish history with the book that's on your lap, the great book of life, which all our deeds are recorded, that the Machzor talks about, the sense of a God who rewards the good and punishes the evil, is at odds with our lived experience. One does not have to spend too much time exploring Berlin to know that we don't live in a world where people get what they deserve. And so, why bother being distinctive then? If you don't hurt anyone, if you pay your taxes, if you love your family, if you recycle and donate to the Red Cross and the UJA and your cousin's GoFundMe, and who cares if you go to shul, or learn Torah, or eat in a sukkah, or strengthen your families or your community's commitment to Jewish life, or consider yourself a connoisseur of the stuffed crust meat lover's pizza. It turns out that it all matters. It all matters. Let me explain with a non-Jewish example. Winston Churchill was a man of many strengths and many vices, from the deeply wrong, opposing Indian independence, to the mildly amusing, getting a note from his doctor during Prohibition, staying on visits to the United States for medical reasons. Winston needed liquor. Churchill's virtues included seeing the Nazis and the Bolsheviks for what they were from day one, and never wavering in his correct assessment. These convictions, very unpopular in the 1930s, made him singularly essential in battling the Nazi menace in the 1940s. Why was he so convinced that the Germans could not be placated, while others thought Hitler could be appeased? In his youth, as a soldier and war reporter covering the far-flung British Empire, Churchill saw any number of different conflicts, though I won't go into the ethics of empire just now, and he noticed that there were some groups on the Afghan frontier in the South Sudan who were implacable in their convictions. There were earlier iterations of violent extremist groups that oppressed innocents in those same regions today. So Churchill, no woke globalist he, was able to recognize that this was not something unique to any one culture or ethnic group. This was a human trait. As Churchill's biographer Andrew Roberts notes, Churchill saw, quote, a form of fanaticism that, in many key features, its sheer implacability, contempt for Christianity, opposition to liberal Western values, addiction to violence, demand for total allegiance, and so on, were not unlike the political fanaticism that he was to encounter 40 years later. And Roberts continues, none of the three British prime ministers in the 1930s had personally encountered such extremism in their personal lives, and they were tragically slow to discern the nature of Nazi ideology. Churchill had fought against fanaticism in his youth and recognized its salient features earlier than anyone else. So Churchill was instrumental in defeating Nazism because he had enough experience to recognize fanaticism when he saw it. He, essentially alone among the British ruling class, was not fooled because of his unique knowledge and experience, and the world benefited greatly from this. This is precisely the role that Jews play. God created a world with great diversity, and it's an article of faith that that's a good thing. It also means we have a specific role to play. Jews, who are deeply engaged with our unique tradition, with our particular texts, with our songs and stories and foods and mores, bring a particular perspective to any and every situation, and we help ground ourselves, help set a high bar for our ethical lives, benefit our future, our society, and contribute in a way that is different from others when we engage with this. This is the key point that we can forget as we ease into the mainstream of American life. We're blessed with a unique perspective that comes from an intimate connection with a history that has not always been a blessing. It's an easy but significant missed opportunity. When distracted, we lose the script. Maybe for you it's learning, maybe it's art, maybe it's tzedakah, maybe it's volunteering, maybe it's cooking. But if we disengage, something as important is lost. And when the world needs our voice, we won't be there to be able to give it. So when I had a chance to teach at that partially destroyed yet fully functioning synagogue in Berlin, I chose a teaching from the 5th century Midrashic collection Sifrei, Dvarim. It's written that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught a parable of a man who gets 2 ships, tied them to anchors and iron weights, and sailed them out to the middle of the sea and built a palace upon them. Now, I know this is an unusual architectural plan, but you should know that whenever the rabbis are telling a story and there's a palace in it, the palace is representation for God's place on earth, right? Palace means God. As long as the two ships are tied to each other, Rabbi Shimon teaches, the palace stands firm. Once the ships are separated, the palace cannot stand. This, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, is the way it is with us, the people of Israel. We're in the sea, which is often a rough place to be. It's far more turbulent than life on land. We're in a precarious situation with a difficult task. We, and there's this striking part of the Midrash, highlighted to me by my teacher, Rabbi Brad Artson, it says that we are not in the same boat. We're in separate boats. And that's okay. The trick is we can't drift too far apart, even when the seas gets rough, or then the palace will crumble. We're in this together, but we can also acknowledge we're in this separately. Our challenge is not only to keep ourselves afloat, but to stay within sight of those who are in a different boat. The people we think are in a different boat than we are, we still have to make sure we don't drift too far apart. If we drift too far apart, the palace, God's presence in this world, collapses. This past summer, Karen and I went to a ceremony, my wife marking the closing of her childhood synagogue. It's Temple HaTikva, just up Route 206 in Flanders. They had always operated close to the edge, but COVID and the changes in habits that came with the last few years proved to be too much. That synagogue is gone. My former shul, Beth Jacob Synagogue in Hamilton, Ontario, just sold their building to another religious organization, is leasing a portion of it back. There were long difficulties in changing demographics, and again, the pandemic made things worse. And selling the building made the most sense to stash funds to stabilize the community for the future. I spoke with a pastor last week who said that his church's main issue that concerned him for the future was malaise. We're okay here, but only if we can count on each other. We can be so much stronger if we all pitch in. So learn. Talk with someone you don't know so well. Visit an alien acquaintance. Call someone. Donate some time to those in need. Sing with us on Shabbat. Stay to help clean up. Let me buy you a cup of coffee sometime and we'll talk. There's so many ways to connect to the tradition, even by just ordering the stuffed crust veggie lovers pizza instead of the meat, and turn dinner into a sacred encounter with the mitzvah of kashrut. I really should probably order a salad too. I'll stop talking about food now. We all face challenges. We should pay attention to the communities that face the greatest challenge of all. In Berlin, there's an empty space where the sanctuary used to be, memorials for displaced multitudes everywhere, and still a community grows. The main part of the building is gone, but the main part of the purpose of the community is there. Meaningful lives depend on working on something that will outlast you, on building human connections, on learning more, on feeling more deeply. This is what we do. This is what Jewish communities are about. Internet use and streaming content is up. Communal engagement and, according to studies, levels of mental health in this country are down. At all ages, there's a spiritual crisis, and we cannot blame this one on Trump. Can't blame it on Hollywood or CNN or the mainstream media. This one's on us. We have to engage with what is meaningful to create a society that cares for us all, no matter what. We have to search, but not in the internet sense. We're about to say Yizkor, to remember those who have gone before us. We think of their deeds, how their love, their actions, their principles impacted our lives. And implicit in this is that someday we will be the ones someone says Yizkor for. This year I'm holding our friend Frank Dundershine in my heart. Frank and Janet didn't have children to say Yizkor, so it's us, their friends, and their community. Frank, whose scientific mind is evident in his art, that's the shul, whose biting wit was a part of his deep devotion to a cause larger than himself, to our shul. Our bodies, like that grand sanctuary in Berlin, will not last forever. Our souls, like the echo of the prayers and the smaller spaces that remain, will. We build and rebuild. We commit and recommit. We understand that we are inheritors of a sacred trust, that there are a precious few of us to carry it on. We'll keep our boats afloat and the palace standing. Gemar Chatima Tova. May you and your loved ones be sealed for a year of love, of fulfillment, of prosperity, of tikkun, and of living up to the awesome responsibilities we're blessed to carry. Shana Tova.